Derek Vaughn hit the mat so hard the windows shook. 1 second he was laughing. The next, he was staring at the ceiling, a single father's knee pressed gently, precisely against his chest. His own arm locked in a hold he couldn't break with twice the effort. The gym went dead silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. And the man standing over him? He wasn't even breathing hard. But here's what nobody in that room knew, not Derek. Not the two black belts frozen behind him. Not the camera still recording the quiet man they had mocked all evening, hadn't even shown them 20% of what he was capable of. Drop a comment with your city. I'd want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. Part 1. The Man They Misjudged. The evening started the way most Tuesdays did for Marcus Bennett. He got off work at 5:15. Still wearing his maintenance coveralls with the Frontier Airlines patch on the left shoulder. Drove 32 minutes across Denver traffic, picked Lily up from after-school care. Stopped at the McDonald's on Federal Boulevard because she'd had a hard spelling test and deserved a chocolate milkshake. And then sat in the parking lot of the McDonald's for 11 minutes while she finished it, because he had learned, through 3 years of single fatherhood, that you don't rush an 8-year-old through a chocolate milkshake. You just don't. Dad, Lily said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand in a way that would have made her kindergarten teacher cry. What if the other kids are better than me? Marcus looked at her in the rearview mirror. Better at what? At the class. It's your first day. Baby, nobody's better than you on their first day. They're all just scared the same way you are. She considered this with grave seriousness that 8-year-olds reserve for matters of genuine importance. Are you scared? Marcus smiled. Every single day. She seemed to find this comforting in some way that he didn't fully understand, but deeply appreciated. Okay, she said. Let's go. He helped her out of the truck, took her small pink sports bag off the back seat, the one with the white stars on it that she'd picked out herself at Target, slung it over his shoulder without thinking, and walked with her toward the front doors of Iron Valley Martial Arts Center. If Marcus noticed the way people looked at him when they came through those doors, he didn't show it. But he noticed. He always noticed. What he saw in the half-second of calibration that had become as automatic to him as breathing was a gym that was very proud of itself. Championship banners on every wall. Framed photographs of competitors mid-kick, mid-throw, mid-triumph. A front desk with trophies arranged so deliberately that they had to have been arranged, nobody's trophies, accidentally, looked that impressive. He also saw 3 men near the back of the main floor who looked up when he walked in and immediately had the kind of reaction that told him everything he needed to know about the next 2 hours. The man in front was big. Not sloppy, big-trained big. Shoulders that spoke of years of dedicated work. A 4th-degree black belt patch on his gi that he clearly considered to be a significant piece of personal information. He had the face of a man who had been the most impressive person in most rooms, for long enough that he had stopped being able to imagine a room where that wasn't true. His name, Marcus would learn later, was Derek Vaughn. The man beside him was younger, leaner, and holding his phone in the way that people hold phones when they are always, at some level, considering whether this moment might be worth recording. He had the practiced energy of someone who had built a small following somewhere online and now experienced the world, slightly, through that lens, always performing. Even when he thought he was just existing. That was Ryan Cole. The third man stood slightly apart from the other two, heavy set in the way of a power athlete, with the kind of stillness that sometimes indicated patience and sometimes indicated something else. He was watching Marcus with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read yet, which meant he was probably the most dangerous of the 3. Trevor Mills. Marcus didn't know their names yet, he would. What he knew, in the immediate and wordless way he had learned to know things about people in rooms, was that these 3 men had already decided something about him before he opened his mouth. He had seen that look before. He had seen it in much more dangerous places than a martial arts gym in Denver, Colorado. He took Lily to the front desk, got her checked in for the children's beginner class, and walked her back to where a young female instructor was setting up mats for the kids' session. Lily squeezed his hand before she let go tight. The way she did when she was trying not to show she was nervous, and then she walked onto the mat with her chin up. And Marcus felt the particular combination of pride and heartache that he had come to understand was just what loving a brave child felt like. He watched her for a moment. Then he turned and walked toward the adult beginner registration area. Derek Vaughn stepped into his path, not blocking it. Exactly. Just close enough to make the intention clear. "Can I help you with something?" Derek said. The tone was the kind of tone that isn't actually asking a question. Marcus met his eyes. "I'm here for the beginner class." Derek looked him up and down slowly, not subtly. The kind of look that was designed to be noticed, designed to communicate assessment and conclusion in a single long glance. "The adult class, yes. Starts in 10 minutes. I know." Derek tilted his head slightly. It was a gesture that Marcus recognized, the unconscious performance of superiority. The way certain people angle themselves when they are deciding whether you are worth their time. "You train anywhere before?" "Some," Marcus said. "A while ago." "Where?" "Different places." Derek smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Different places. Okay." He looked back over his shoulder at Ryan, who was already lifting his phone. "We got a new student. Says he's trained in different places." Ryan grinned. "What kind of places? Like the YMCA, Planet Fitness?" He pitched his voice higher. "Mock enthusiastic. They've got great kickboxing cardio classes." "Man, very intense." A few people nearby laughed. Marcus didn't. He looked at Derek. "Is there a form I need to fill out?" Something shifted in Derek's expression. He hadn't expected Marcus to simply continue past the moment. And the fact that Marcus had calmly, without acknowledgement, without the flinch or the flush or the tightened jaw that Derek was clearly accustomed to getting, seemed to bother him more than if Marcus had reacted. "Front desk," Derek said. "Myra'll get you set up." Marcus nodded. "Thanks." He walked past them without another word. Behind him, he heard Ryan say something in a lower voice, and he heard laughter. And he let it go the way he had learned to let 1,000 things go. You pick your battles, and you never pick them for someone else's reasons. The beginner class had 12 students. 3 were returning to martial arts after long breaks. Marcus could tell by the way their bodies remembered the stance even when their minds were working to recall it. 4 were true beginners. Young men in their 20s, with the particular physical confidence of people who had never been seriously challenged. 3 were women in their 30s who had the focused, practical energy of people who were there for a real reason and didn't intend to waste an evening. 1 was a teenager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And then there was Marcus, who stood near the back of the group and moved carefully and quietly and made himself look like a man who was figuring out where to put his feet. Derek led the class personally. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. A 4th-degree black belt leading a beginner class wasn't standard. Typically, that was junior instructor work, which meant Derek was there for a reason that wasn't about the beginners. The class went through basic stances, basic blocks, basic striking combinations. Marcus followed along at a level that was about 60% of what he was capable of, which still put him comfortably in the middle of the group, unremarkable in either direction. Derek circled the room as he taught, correcting posture, adjusting form. He spent a long time with Marcus, not in a helpful way. "You're planting your feet," Derek said, stopping behind him. "You plant your feet like that in a real situation, you're going to fall down." "I'll work on it," Marcus said. "See? That's the thing. You say you've trained before, different places, but you're planting your feet like you've never stood in a stance in your life." "I'm a little rusty." "Rusty," Derek laughed. "Right." He looked around at the rest of the class. "Folks, this is what happens when you train somewhere that doesn't teach you properly. You build bad habits. You think you know something, so you don't listen. And then when it actually matters, he made a gesture. The gesture was dismissive in a way that was technically about bad footwork but was actually about Marcus himself. The other students were uncomfortable. Marcus could feel it, the way the room had that particular tension of people witnessing something they didn't want to witness and not being sure what to do. He straightened his stance slightly. "Better?" he said. Derek looked at his feet. Something crossed his face, a brief, involuntary acknowledgement, and then it was gone. "Better," he said, and moved on. Ryan didn't put his phone away for the entire class. He moved around the edges of the room, recording casually, the way someone records when they want to seem like they're not recording. He got footage of the other students that he probably never thought about. He got a lot of footage of Marcus. At one point, he came and stood near Marcus during a partner drill and said, quietly enough that it was just between them, "You come here with your kid every week." Man, that's sweet. Very wholesome. Marcus was focused on the drill. "She's in the kids' class. I know, saw you come in. Cute bag." He paused. "Pink stars." Something in the way he said it, the precision of it, the slight emphasis was designed to land somewhere specific. Not a threat, not quite, but a reminder that he had looked, that he had noticed the bag, that he knew where Lily was. Marcus turned his head and looked at Ryan directly. Ryan smiled and moved away. Marcus turned back to the drill, but something had changed in the way he was standing. Not visible to anyone in the room, not visible to Ryan, who was already filming someone else. Just an internal shift, the way a very still thing changes before it moves. 40 minutes into the class, Trevor Mills walked in. He'd been watching from the doorway for a while before that, but he came in properly at the 40-minute mark in full training gear and stood with his arms crossed against the far wall. He wasn't there to train. He was there to watch Marcus. Marcus knew this because Trevor's eyes didn't follow the class. They didn't watch the drills or the instructor demonstrations. They stayed on Marcus for the entire time Trevor was in the room. The class moved into a section on basic grappling wrist grabs. How to break them, how to create distance. Derek paired Marcus with the largest of the young men in the class, a guy named Kyle, who was maybe 23, 6 feet and broad, who had clearly been told by Derek to work hard and not go easy. Kyle grabbed Marcus's wrist. Marcus broke the hold in the way he'd been taught in the beginner demonstrations, technically correct. Slightly slow, completely controlled. Kyle grabbed again. Marcus broke again. They went through it 4 times. And on the 4th time, Kyle added something that wasn't in the beginner curriculum, a twist and pull meant to off balance, which was an intermediate technique that Kyle almost certainly hadn't invented on his own. Marcus let himself stumble slightly. Just enough. Kyle looked back at Derek with a grin. Derek nodded. Marcus reset his stance. "Want to go?" Looked at him. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Kyle grabbed again, harder this time, with the confidence of someone who had successfully off-balanced a person once and expected to do it again. Marcus didn't stumble. He also didn't use the beginner technique. What he did was almost invisible, a slight redirection, a minimal shift of weight, a movement that Kyle's body simply couldn't interpret fast enough to counter, and then Kyle's own momentum was working against him. And Marcus was stable, and Kyle was the one taking an involuntary step forward. It lasted less than 2 seconds. Nobody who wasn't looking for it would have seen anything remarkable. But Derek was looking for it, and Derek saw it. He crossed the room in a few strides and stopped in front of Marcus. The class kept moving around them. "Where'd you learn that?" Derek said. His voice was different. Not aggressive, not mocking. Just different. "Like I said," Marcus said. "Different places." Derek stared at him for a long moment. Then something happened to his face, a sequence of small changes that Marcus recognized as a man recalibrating, reassessing, deciding that what he had initially decided was wrong, and arriving at a new conclusion that was not better. Exactly, but different. And the conclusion Derek arrived at, Marcus could see it clearly, was not "I misjudged this man." It was "I need to find out exactly what this man is," which was much more dangerous. After class, Derek said quietly, "Stick around. We do an informal sparring session. More experienced guys. You should see how you do." It wasn't an invitation. Not exactly. Marcus looked at him. "My daughter's waiting. It won't take long." He moved away before Marcus could answer. The children's class ended at 7:30. Marcus knew because through the glass window that separated the main floor from the kids' area, he could see the little group of children starting to collect their things. Their parents filing in. He could see Lily. She was talking to another girl her age, laughing about something. The particular physical laughter of children who have just met and found the whole thing delightful. She was looking around for him. She saw him through the glass and waved with her whole arm. He raised a hand, smiled, turned back to the class. Derek was watching him. He had seen the wave. He had seen Marcus see Lily, and something moved behind Derek's eyes that Marcus didn't like at all. Derek raised his voice so the whole class could hear. "All right, let's wrap up the formal curriculum." He looked at Marcus. "Before we finish, I want to do a quick demonstration for our new students. Show them what the difference is between where they are right now and what consistent, proper training looks like." He paused. "Marcus, you want to come up here?" The class just to look at him. Marcus didn't move. "I think I'll pass," he said. "Come on. It's just a demo. Nothing serious. I'm good." Derek's expression didn't change, but his voice did just slightly, just under the words. "Man comes in here. Tells us he's trained. We'd love to see what that looks like. That's all." "I'm here for a beginner class," Marcus said. "I'm a beginner." A few people laughed at that, not cruelly more surprised, because the statement had a quality of genuine simplicity that was hard to argue with. Derek didn't find it funny. "You know what I think?" he said, and the mock casual tone was gone now. This was something else. "I think someone who carries his daughter's bag into a martial arts gym and stands in the back of the beginner class, trying to look like he doesn't know what he's doing. I think that person either genuinely doesn't know what he's doing, or he does know and he's too scared to show it." The room was quiet. Marcus looked at him steadily. Or he said, "He's just here for a beginner class." Derek pointed toward the window, toward Lily. "Your daughter's watching," he said. "What's she learning from you right now?" It was a calculated thing to say. Derek knew it. The room felt it. And Marcus, who had spent the entire evening absorbing insults with the patient steadiness of a man who had decided long ago that words from people like this did not get to matter, Marcus felt something shift, not anger. Something older than anger. Something a father feels when someone uses his child as a weapon in an argument she doesn't know is happening. He looked at Derek for a long moment. Then he looked at the window. Lily was watching. She had the slightly puzzled expression of a child who could see that something was happening, that adults weren't explaining. Marcus looked back at Derek. "Class is over," Marcus said quietly. "I'm going to collect my daughter." He turned toward the door, and that was when Ryan moved to the door. Not fast, not threateningly, just moved, so that he was standing in front of it, phone in his hand, recording. "Come on, man," Ryan said. "Stay for the sparring session. It'll be fun." Marcus stopped. He didn't turn around yet. He stood very still for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned. Derek was in the center of the mat. Trevor had moved from the wall. Ryan was at the door. The other students, the beginners, the people who had just come for a Tuesday evening class, were drifting toward the edges of the room with the instinct of people who suddenly understood that this was not something they were supposed to be in the middle of. "Open the door," Marcus said. Ryan smiled. "Just a quick session. You said you've trained. Show us." "Open the door." "We're not keeping you," Derek said. "From the center of the mat. We're inviting you." Marcus looked at the three of them. Then he looked toward the window. Lily was standing with her face close to the glass now. She had her pink bag over her shoulder. She was looking for him. She didn't understand what she was looking at. Marcus set down the training bag he'd been given at registration. He rolled his neck once. He took off his watch, an old diver's watch, scratched from years of hanger work, and set it on top of the bag. He looked at Derek. "You want to see what different places taught me," Marcus said. It was not a question. Derek spread his hands. "That's all we're asking." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then close your eyes," he said. "Because it's going to happen fast." And in the half-second, before Derek moved in the last moment of the quiet that had defined Marcus Bennett's entire evening, Ryan had his phone up. Trevor had shifted his weight forward, and a dozen people around the edges of the room held their breath without knowing why. The quiet man with the pink bag and the worn shoes and the 8-year-old daughter waiting on the other side of the glass had just said the last thing he was going to say. Everything that came after was something else entirely. Derek moved first. That was the thing about men like Derek Vaughn, they always moved first. Because their whole identity was built on the assumption that moving first was the same as winning. 22 years of martial arts, a 4th-degree black belt, a gym that bore the name Iron Valley because Derek had chosen it specifically to project strength, permanence, something that could not be moved. He had thrown the first strike in more sparring sessions than he could count. And in almost every single one of those sessions, that first strike had told him everything he needed to know about the person in front of him. He threw it now. A forward grab, left hand, reaching for Marcus's collar. Right cocked back, a move designed not to injure but to control. To pull a man forward and off balance and put him in a position where the next 30 seconds went. However, Derek decided they went. It was the move you used on someone you wanted to humiliate rather than hurt. It was a statement. It said, "I'm not even going to hit you properly. I'm just going to pick you up and put you down, and everyone in this room is going to see that." Marcus's left hand came up. Not to block, not to deflect, to redirect. 2 fingers, just 2, made contact with Derek's wrist at the exact moment. Derek's grip closed on empty air. And Marcus turned his shoulder, maybe 4 inches to the left. And suddenly, Derek's entire body weight was committed to a direction that Marcus was no longer in. And the physics of that situation had only one possible resolution. Derek went forward, not stumbling, not flailing. He went forward the way a man goes forward, when the ground he expected to push against simply isn't there, with a horrible, complete full-body recognition that something has gone deeply wrong. Marcus moved with him. Still those 2 fingers on Derek's wrist. Still, that shoulder turned, but now his right hand had found the back of Derek's elbow. And the geometry of the hold was such that Derek's own momentum was doing most of the work. And there was nothing Derek could do except go where physics was sending him. He hit the mat on his back with the flat, whole body impact of a controlled throw, not violent, not brutal, but absolutely certain. Marcus's knee settled against his sternum. Light. Precise. Derek tapped before he even consciously decided to. It was a reflex, the body's acknowledgement that it was in a position from which it could not escape. Delivered before the brain had finished processing how it had gotten there. 8 seconds. The gym was so quiet that Marcus could hear the ventilation system humming somewhere above the ceiling tiles. He stood up. He stepped back. He didn't look at Ryan. He didn't look at Trevor. He looked at Derek the way you look at a man who has just had an important experience and might need a moment to understand what it means. Derek sat up slowly. He put one hand on the mat. He looked at his own hand for a second, like it belonged to someone else. Then he looked up at Marcus, and the expression on Derek's face was one that the people who witnessed it that evening would describe differently, depending on who you asked. Some said it was shock. Some said it was anger. One of the beginners near the back wall, a woman named Patricia, who had come to the class because her daughter was getting married in Albuquerque, and she wanted to feel stronger before she drove there alone. Patricia said afterward that what she saw on Derek's face in that moment was something she didn't have a word for. Not shock, not anger. Something more like a man watching a version of reality he had held for a very long time collapse without any structural warning. Ryan hadn't made a decision to stop. His thumb had just stopped. He was staring at the mat where Derek was still sitting. And his face had the specific expression of a person who had built an entire narrative in his head, confident, detailed, already edited for maximum engagement, and was now watching that narrative fail at its first premise. Derek got to his feet. He didn't brush himself off. He didn't stretch. He stood up with the careful deliberateness of a man who was working very hard not to appear as shaken as he was. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Okay." Ryan's thumb moved. The recording started again, and Marcus saw the thumb move, saw the phone come back up, and understood immediately that Ryan had made a decision. Not a decision to record, a decision to win. He had looked at what had just happened to Derek, and instead of reconsidering, he had concluded that Derek had simply underestimated the target, and that Ryan was not going to make the same mistake. Ryan came in differently, lower, more cautious. He'd been training for 6 years and he was fast. Genuinely fast, with the kind of quick twitch speed that showed up in his movement before you could consciously register it. He covered the distance between himself and Marcus with 3 steps that ate up the mat in a way that would have caught most people mid-reaction. Marcus wasn't most people. He was already moving on Ryan's second step. What happened next was the kind of thing that later, watching the footage, people would slow down to half speed and still argue about. Ryan's lead hand came forward in a jab that was meant as a rangefinder, and Marcus slipped it not backward, sideways inside the punch, which put him closer to Ryan rather than farther. And Ryan's brain processed this as wrong. In the half second he had to process anything. Marcus's right hand found Ryan's extended arm just above the elbow. His left hand found Ryan's shoulder. And then Marcus did something that looked at full speed, almost gentle, a compact rotation of his own body that used Ryan's committed jab as a lever. And Ryan was suddenly airborne in a way he had absolutely not planned. And the mat came up to meet him with an impact that knocked the breath cleanly out of his body. Marcus was beside him before Ryan had stopped moving. A hand on the back of Ryan's neck. Controlled. Firm. Ryan tapped. Twice. Fast. 35 seconds. The phone had skidded about 4 feet across the mat when Ryan hit it. The screen was still on. It was still recording. Aimed now at the fluorescent lights above, capturing nothing useful and everything important. Ryan lay there for a moment with his cheek against the mat, breathing. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly, and he meant it. And the people close enough to hear it would remember later that it was the most confusing thing they'd ever witnessed. A man apologizing to someone who had just tried to physically intimidate him, and meaning it without any irony at all. He stood up. Trevor hadn't moved. He was still standing where he'd been when Marcus first turned around to the left. About 10 feet back, slightly angled, and Marcus had been aware of Trevor for every single one of those 43 seconds. The way you are aware of the thing that might actually matter, even while you are dealing with the things in front of you. Here, Trevor was different. From the other two, Marcus had known it from the first times looked it across the gym. Derek was pride, Ryan was performance. But Trevor was something more straightforward, and in some ways more honest. Trevor was the thing that happened when a naturally powerful person spent a long time in an environment that told them their power was the most important thing about them. Trevor wasn't performing. He wasn't protecting his reputation or his social media following. He was angry in the way that very strong men get angry when they see something they can't explain. And the explanation that kept rising to the surface, that the man standing across from them might simply be better, was one that Trevor's entire identity was organized around rejecting. He came off the wall. No announcement. No words, he just came. He was fast for his size. And his size was genuinely impressive, and he hit with the kind of weight that made the air feel different when he moved through it. He threw a combination, a low kick meant to compromise Marcus's base, and a right hand that came behind it with serious intent. Not a demonstration strike, but an actual strike, the kind that ended conversations. Marcus moved back on the kick just enough, just inside the range where it could damage, and the right hand came, and Marcus rolled with it. Turned his head into the punch rather than away from it, which seemed insane, and was in fact the only correct response because it kept him close and inside where Trevor's reach was his enemy rather than his advantage. And Marcus's left arm came under Trevor's right and found a grip, and his right hand came over the top of Trevor's shoulder, and he went with Trevor's forward momentum rather than against it. The trip was simple. Marcus's right leg behind Trevor's left. Trevor's own weight doing the work. And then 310 pounds of muscle and fury were coming down. And Marcus went with it, guided it, controlled the landing with a care that Trevor absolutely did not deserve, and Marcus gave him anyway. And they hit the mat together, and Marcus came out of it in a position that left no reasonable options. Trevor didn't tap immediately. He didn't. He lay there and breathed through his nose, and his jaw was tight, and his eyes were hot, and Marcus could feel the resistance in his body, not the resistance of someone who believed he could get out of the hold, but the resistance of a man who was refusing to surrender the story he had told himself for 20 years about what he was. Marcus waited. He didn't increase the pressure. He didn't say anything. He just waited. The way you wait when you understand that what you're actually waiting for has nothing to do with martial arts. 58 seconds from when Trevor came off the wall. Trevor tapped. One tap. Slow. Like it cost him something real. Marcus released him immediately. He stood up. He did not offer Trevor a hand. Not because he didn't want to, but because he understood. With the instinct he'd developed across years of working with men who built their identity around being undefeatable, that a hand offered right now would be experienced as the deepest possible humiliation. So he simply stood and stepped back and gave Trevor the space to get up on his own terms. 60 seconds. Not quite. Close enough. The room was there isn't a good word for what the room was. Not silent. Because there were sounds, someone's sharp exhale near the back, the scuff of a shoe, the low hum of the ventilation. Ryan somewhere on the mat making a sound like a man who has had the wind knocked out of him and is deciding whether to be embarrassed about it. But the human sounds had stopped. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved from the walls where they had pressed themselves during the preceding 60 seconds. Marcus bent down and picked up Lily's pink bag. He picked up his watch from the top of the training bag and put it back on his wrist. He looked at the face of it, an old Seiko, bought at a PX in a country he didn't talk about, scratched from a decade of maintenance work on aircraft engines. Still keeping perfect time. He turned toward the door. Ryan was still on the mat. Sitting up now, one hand pressed to his ribs. He had left his phone where it had skidded. He was looking at Marcus with an expression that had gone through several stages in the last 90 seconds and had sometimes at something that wasn't quite readable from across the room. But he was not blocking the door. None of them were. Marcus walked to the door and pushed it open and stepped through. Lily was standing on the other side of the glass partition in the hallway that connected the main floor to the children's training area. She had her own bag on her shoulder, and she was wearing the expression she wore when she had been waiting longer than expected and was working very hard not to make it a big deal. "Dad," she said, "I thought you forgot about me." "I don't forget about you," Marcus said. "Not ever." She looked at him for a second. She looked at the door he'd just come through, and then back at him. "I'm fine. Baby, your face is." She reached up and touched his jaw, and he realized that Trevor's right hand had landed closer than he'd allowed himself to register in the moment. There would be a bruise, probably by tomorrow morning. "I bumped it," he said. She gave him the look that 8-year-olds give you when they know you are not telling them the whole truth and have decided to accept that for now. "Oh, okay," she said. "Can we get ice cream? We just had milkshakes. That was an hour ago." "My body has processed it," he laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere lower than the throat. The kind of laugh that was actually relief expressed as humor. And he put his hand on her shoulder, and they walked down the hallway toward the exit. Behind them, through the walls of Iron Valley Martial Arts Center, the room was beginning to come back to life. He could hear it, the movement of people, a voice or two, the specific sound of a space that has just witnessed something and is starting to process it. He didn't look back. He had told himself, in the parking lot of that McDonald's on Federal Boulevard, not 2 hours ago, that he was going to take his daughter to a beginner martial arts class. And he was going to be there for that, and he was going to be the father he had decided to be, rather than the man he used to be. He had kept one of those promises tonight. The other one, the one about being invisible, about moving quietly through the world, about leaving the other version of himself so far behind that even people who looked right at him wouldn't see it. That promise had taken some damage. He pushed open the exit door. Cold October air, Denver evening. The parking lot lights had come on while they were inside, and they gave everything that particular amber quality of early autumn nights. And his truck was where he'd left it, and Lily's car seat was in the back, and there were exactly $9 in his wallet, and a half tank of gas, and a bruise forming on his jaw, and his daughter was asking him about ice cream. As if none of the last 60 seconds had happened. Which was either because she didn't know or because she was already, at 8 years old, learning the particular grace of letting people she loved be more than one thing at once. He put her bag in the back. He got in the driver's seat. He sat there for a moment before he started the engine. "Dad," Lily said from the back seat. "Are you thinking?" "Yeah." "What about?" He thought about Derek Vaughn's face when he hit the mat. He thought about Ryan's phone skidding across the floor, still recording. He thought about Trevor's jaw tight, with the refusal to acknowledge what had just happened. He thought about a locked doorknob and a choice made in the full clarity of understanding exactly what he was choosing. "Ice cream," he said. "Really? There's a place on Colfax. They have a salted caramel one that I've been thinking about for 2 weeks. Dad." Her voice was deeply satisfied. "You've been hiding this from me." "I have. I'm a complicated person." She laughed. And he started the engine, and they pulled out of the parking lot of Iron Valley Martial Arts Center into the Denver night. And Marcus Bennett let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for years. He didn't know yet what was waiting for him. He didn't know about the footage. He didn't know that Ryan's phone, lying on the mat of the gym they had just left, had recorded everything from its strange angle on the floor, the ceiling lights, the edge of the mat, the sounds of 3 controlled confrontations that lasted under a minute combined, and the voice of a quiet man saying, "I'm sorry," to someone who had tried to trap him. He didn't know that Ryan, in the hour after they left, would sit on the mat of his own gym with ice on his ribs and look at that footage and make a decision that he would spend considerable time afterward wondering about. He didn't know that the decision Ryan made was to post it, all of it. Not the edited version. Not the version that started at the moment Derek moved. The full footage, from the moment Marcus walked in with the pink bag, through every mocking comment, through the locked door, through 60 seconds that had just permanently rearranged something in the hierarchy of Iron Valley Martial Arts Center. Marcus didn't know any of that yet. He was on Colfax Avenue, finding a parking spot, watching Lily press her face to the window of the ice cream shop to see what flavors they had. Thinking about salted caramel and bruises and the particular weight of a child's hand in yours when she is trying not to show she was scared. Inside the gym he had just left, Ryan Cole picked up his phone from the mat. He sat with it for a long time. He looked at what was on it, and somewhere between the pain in his ribs and the specific memory of the mat coming up to meet him, something shifted in Ryan Cole, some calculation that had always, in his life, resolved in the direction of the most shareable version of events, and it resolved differently tonight. He pressed upload. 61 seconds of footage that began with a man carrying a pink bag and ended with 3 black belts sitting on a mat, while that same man walked out the door without looking back. By midnight, 400,000 people had watched it. By the time Marcus finished his salted caramel ice cream and got Lily home and into bed and sat down on the couch in the quiet of his apartment with a bag of frozen peas pressed against his jaw, the number was climbing past 1 million. His phone, sitting on the kitchen counter because he had a rule about phones after 8 o'clock when Lily was home, buzzed twice and then kept buzzing and then stopped being able to stop. He didn't look at it. He sat with the frozen peas against his face and the quiet of the apartment around him and thought about what he had promised himself years ago about the kind of man he was going to be. He thought about whether tonight had honored that promise or broken it. He thought about Lily's hand in his, in the parking lot of Iron Valley, and the way she'd said, "Are you okay with that particular 8-year-old gravity?" And the way his jaw had started to ache when the adrenaline finished leaving his system. He thought about Derek saying, "Your daughter is watching." He thought about what she was watching. He thought about what he wanted her to see when she looked at him. The phone kept buzzing. Marcus Bennett pressed the frozen peas more firmly against his jaw, leaned his head back against the couch, closed his eyes, and sat with all of it in the quiet of the only place that had ever mattered to him. The apartment where his daughter was sleeping. The home he had built for her out of the ruins of a life he had left behind. The only fight that had ever truly counted. The phone had been buzzing for 6 hours straight when Marcus finally picked it up. It was 4:47 in the morning. He knew the time without looking because he had been awake since 2. Lying on the couch with the frozen peas long since warm and useless against his jaw. Listening to the apartment breathe around him the way apartments do at night when one person is awake and one small person is deeply, trustingly asleep in the back bedroom. He picked up the phone and looked at the screen and set it face down on the cushion beside him. Then he picked it up again. 43 missed calls, most of them from numbers he didn't recognize. 11 text messages from a coworker named Gerald, who worked the day shift at the hangar, and whose text escalated in a way that told a story all by themselves. The first one said, "Hey man, is this you in this video?" The third one said, "Marcus, this is you in this video." The ninth one said, "Brother, I don't know what you did, but you are everywhere right now." And the 11th one, sent at 4:30 in the morning, said, "I'm sorry for texting this late, I just wanted you to know. I showed my wife, and she cried." Marcus sat with the phone in his hand for a long moment. Then he opened the video. He watched 61 seconds of footage taken from a phone lying on the floor of a gym, aimed at fluorescent ceiling lights, capturing sound better than image, the particular sounds of a man who had not wanted any of this, being given no other option, and handling it with the minimum necessary force and the maximum possible care. He watched it the way you watch something you were present for and are now experiencing from outside yourself. Strange and familiar at the same time, like hearing your own voice recorded and played back. He closed the app. He put the phone down. He sat in the dark for a while longer. And he thought about a version of his life, a version he had worked very deliberately to build, in which he was simply a man. An aircraft maintenance technician. A father.
Or Kim or call X after you. What your wife says.
And argued with her about milkshakes and put frozen peas on his face in the dark. That version of his life had just become something more complicated. At 5:15, he got up and made coffee and stood in the kitchen drinking it. And at 5:45 he went and stood in the doorway of Lily's room and watched her sleep for a few minutes the way he had been doing since she was born, which was a thing he had never told anyone because it seemed like the kind of thing that was private, not because it was shameful, but because it was too important to expose to the general weather of the world. She was sleeping with her arm around a stuffed elephant named Gerald. Yes. Same name as the coworker. No. This was not a coincidence. Marcus had ever figured out how to explain, and her face had the absolute peace of a child who trusted the night completely. He went back to the kitchen. He called in to work. Then he sat down and looked at his phone again, and this time he did not put it down for a long time. 3.2 million views. That was the number on Ryan Cole's original post when Marcus found it at 6 in the morning. 3.2 million people had watched 61 seconds of footage from the floor of a gym in Denver, Colorado. The comments numbered in the tens of thousands. Marcus did not read most of them. He read enough to understand that the internet had formed two broad camps that had nothing to do with the other and everything to do with whatever each person had needed the video to be. One camp said, "This proves that traditional martial arts is overrated, and here is my detailed breakdown of why." The other camp said, "This is the most wholesome thing I have ever seen, and here is my detailed breakdown of why." Neither camp was entirely right. Neither camp was entirely wrong. Both camps were arguing with the other camp in ways that had very little to do with Marcus Bennett or his daughter, or a Tuesday evening in Denver that had gone sideways as he had hoped to avoid. He put the phone down. He made breakfast. At 7:15, Lily came out of her bedroom in her pajamas with her hair in the specific configuration that happened when she slept hard and moved around a lot, which Marcus privately thought was one of the best things he had ever seen on a regular basis. And she sat at the kitchen table and said, "You made eggs. with the tone of someone reporting a fact that carried significant personal meaning. "I made eggs," he confirmed. "Are you okay? You look like you didn't sleep." "I slept a little." She looked at his jaw. The bruise had come in overnight. It was purple and yellow and covered maybe 3 inches below his left cheekbone. And there was no version of this morning where he was going to be able to pretend it wasn't there. "That's not from bumping it," Lily said. Marcus set her plate in front of her. "Eat your eggs." "Dad, Lily." She picked up her fork. She looked at the eggs. She looked at him. She put the fork down. "Someone hit you," she said. It was not a question. She said it with the flat certainty of a child who has spent her entire cognitive life paying close attention to one person and has become, as a result, extraordinarily good at reading him. Marcus sat down across from her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "3 summons tried to. One of them got close." Lily stared at him. "At the gym? After the class? Why?" And Marcus looked at his daughter across the kitchen table. At her wild sleep hair and her pajamas, with the little foxes on them, and the stuffed elephant tucked under her left arm, because she'd brought it to breakfast. And he made a decision that he had been wrestling with since 4:47 in the morning. He told her the truth, not all of it. Not the version that involved the full weight of his history, or the specific texture of the 60 seconds on the mat, or the cold calculation of 3 men who had decided that a quiet Tuesday evening was a good time to humiliate someone for an audience, but the honest shape of it that some people at the gym had been unkind, and that they had tried to force a situation that Marcus hadn't wanted, and that Marcus had handled it, and that he was fine, and that she should never let anyone tell her that ignoring unkindness means you're afraid of it. Lily listened to all of this with the focused seriousness she brought to things that mattered. When he finished, she said, "Did you win?" Marcus looked at her. "That wasn't really the point," he said. She considered this for a moment with the thoroughness that indicated she was genuinely thinking about it, rather than just nodding along. "Okay," she said. "But did you?" He looked at the eggs on his plate. "Yeah. I won." She picked up her fork again. "Good," she said, with a finality that seemed to close the subject, and started eating. Marcus sat across from her and felt something in his chest that he didn't have a word for, something that was relief and grief and gratitude, and a kind of love so large it occasionally frightened him with its size. He picked up his fork. He ate his eggs. The phone on the counter buzzed 4 times in a row. Neither of them looked at it. By 9 o'clock that morning, the story had moved from social media to news. Not local news. Not a Denver segment on a Tuesday night class gone sideways. The national news. Marcus found out because his sister called him his younger sister, Denise, who lived in Atlanta and worked in healthcare administration, and called him on birthdays and holidays and the occasional random Tuesday when she felt like it, but had never once called him at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday, and she called him at 9 in the morning on that Wednesday, and the first thing she said was, "Marcus, what did you do?" "Denise, I'm watching you on the news right now. I am watching my brother on the actual news. On the television, in my actual kitchen." "Marcus, it's not as complicated as, they're calling you the quiet father. That's what they're calling you. The quiet father. Marcus, that is your superhero name, and I need you to explain to me how you got a superhero name." He put his hand over his face. "It's not a superhero name. They showed the video. They showed it on the news. They slowed it down. Marcus, they slow motion showed you putting 3 men on the floor, and then they zoomed in on the pink bag. It's Lily's bag. I know it's Lily's bag. The entire country knows it's Lily's bag. That bag is on the news." "Marcus, that pink bag with the white stars in is on the national news." He was quiet for a moment. "Is Lily with you?" Denise asked, and her voice shifted the older sibling channel that ran underneath everything else. The one that was always at its core, just checking. "She's in the other room." "How is she?" "She ate her eggs. She's fine. And you?" It's complicated." Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Marcus, those men locked the door, I know. The video shows them locking the door. It shows everything. The insults. The door, all of it, I know. You knew you were being recorded, I assumed. And you stopped. Started again. You were that controlled. Knowing people were watching. Someone had to be. Another silence. Longer this time. You should call a lawyer, Denise said finally. I don't need a lawyer. Marcus, I don't. I know nothing you did was wrong. I'm saying you need a lawyer. Because 3 people are about to be very embarrassed in very public ways, and embarrassed people do unpredictable things. Please call a lawyer. He wrote down the name she gave him. He didn't call the lawyer that morning. What he did instead was drive Lily to school, which was a 15-minute drive that they spent mostly in silence because Lily was working through something. He could see it in her face. The interior processing that she'd inherited from him. The tendency to go quiet when something required real thought. And at the drop-off circle, she turned to him before she got out and said, Dad, those men were mean to you because they thought you were weak. Yeah, he said. But you weren't weak, you were just quiet. That's right. She nodded slowly. The way she nodded when she was filing something important into a permanent location. I'm gonna think about that, she said. Me too, he said. She got out of the car and walked into school without looking back. Which was always how she did it, no lingering, no second glances. Full commitment to the next thing, and Marcus watched her go through the front doors and sat in the drop-off circle for a moment longer than the pickup line etiquette strictly permitted. Then he pulled out and drove. He did not drive home. He drove to Iron Valley Martial Arts Center. He hadn't planned to. Or maybe he had. In the part of himself that made decisions before the conscious mind got involved. The part that was still calibrated to move toward problems rather than away from them. The gym opened at 10. It was 9:40 when Marcus pulled into the parking lot and sat in his truck. At 9:52, a silver SUV pulled into the lot and Derek Vaughn got out. He was not in training clothes. He was wearing a jacket and dark jeans, and he looked like a man who had not slept and was carrying the particular of someone who had spent the night discovering things about themselves that they would have preferred not to know. He stopped when he saw Marcus's truck. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus got out. They stood in the parking lot of Iron Valley Martial Arts Center on a Wednesday morning in October, with the cold coming off the mountains and the city going about its business around them, and looked at each other across 20 feet of asphalt. Derek looked older than he had the night before. Not physically, something else. I watched the footage, Derek said. Okay, all of it. The full recording. He paused. Ryan posted the whole thing. I know. I didn't know he was going to do that. Marcus didn't say anything. Derek stopped. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the ground and then looked back up. There's not a version of last night that reflects well on me. On any of us. I know that. Yeah, Marcus said. I've been doing this, he gestured at the gym behind him. 22 years. I've been teaching here for 16. I've had this, he stopped again. Tried a different direction. When did you train? Marcus looked at him for a moment. Long time ago. Where? Places that don't exist anymore. Derek absorbed this. Military? Does it matter? No, Derek said. I guess it doesn't. He exhaled. What matters is that I looked at a man who walked in here with his daughter's bag, and I decided I already knew everything about him, and I built an entire evening around that decision. He paused. That's not teaching. That's not anything I'd want to see in an instructor I trusted. Marcus was quiet. I owe you an apology, Derek said. You do. I'm apologizing. I heard you. Derek looked at him. It was the look of a man who had expected the apology to resolve something, and was discovering that it only opened a larger room. Is there something you need from me? Marcus thought about this with genuine care. My daughter, he said. She's 8. She came here last night because she wanted to learn how to be safer. That was the whole reason. She watched something through that window that she's going to be thinking about for a while. He paused. I need to know that this gym is not going to be the thing that teaches her that strength is about who you can embarrass in front of an audience. Derek was very still. That's what I need, Marcus said. A long silence. That's fair, Derek said. He started to say something else. And that was when the news van pulled into the parking lot. Not one van. 2. One from a local affiliate. one with a satellite dish on the roof that indicated something with a broader reach. They came in from Colorado Boulevard with the specific purposeful momentum of people who have a location and a deadline and are not especially interested in anything that isn't their story. Marcus looked at the vans. Derek looked at the vans. "I should go," Marcus said. "Marcus." Derek said his name for the first time. Not Mr. Bennett, not "Hey, Marcus." "For what it's worth, I've been training for 22 years, and I've never seen anyone move like that. Not in competition. Not at any seminar. Not anywhere." He paused. "Who are you?" Marcus picked up his keys. "I'm Lily's dad," he said. He got in his truck, pulled out before the news vans finished parking, and he watched in his rearview mirror as 2 camera crews climbed out and found Derek Vaughn standing in his own parking lot. Alone, in the cold October morning, looking like a man who had spent 22 years building something and was only now, this morning, beginning to understand what it had actually been. The calls kept coming throughout the day. Reporters, media outlets, a producer from a morning show in New York whose name Marcus vaguely recognized, leaving a voicemail that was professional and warm, and which he deleted after 14 seconds. 2 lawyers, different from the one Denise had recommended, who had seen the video and wanted him to know that he had options, and that they would be happy to discuss those options at no initial cost. And then, at 11:47 that morning, a call from a number he didn't recognize with a Colorado Springs area code. He almost didn't answer it. He answered it. "Is this Marcus Bennett?" The voice was older. A woman. Something careful and deliberate in the way she spoke. "Who's calling?" "My name is Patricia Holloway. I was in the beginner class last night at Iron Valley." A pause. "I was standing near the back wall." Marcus remembered her. The woman who'd come to the class because she was driving alone to Albuquerque. He remembered because she'd been the only one in the room who hadn't pressed herself against the wall when things changed. She'd stayed where she was, watching with the stillness of someone who had decided to witness something properly rather than shrink from it. "I remember you," he said. "I'm calling because..." She stopped, started again. "I've been trying to figure out the right way to say this since this morning." Another pause. "I have a daughter. She's 26. She's been in a situation for about 2 years that I haven't known how to help her with. A man who made her feel like she was too weak to leave." Her voice stayed steady. "But only just. I watched that video this morning. I watched what you did. Not the fighting part, I mean, yes. But that wasn't the..." She stopped. "Mr. Bennett, you had every reason to hurt those men. What you did instead was..." She didn't finish the sentence. Marcus sat in his truck in a parking lot on Colfax Avenue and held the phone and waited. "I showed my daughter the video," Patricia said. "And I said to her, this is what real strength looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be." And she... Another stop. Longer. This time, she called her sister. She hasn't spoken to her sister in 8 months. She called her and she said she was ready. Marcus was very still. "I don't know why I'm calling you," Patricia said. "I think I just wanted you to know that what happened last night, what you did, it did something. Beyond the 60 seconds. Beyond the gym, a breath. I wanted you to know," Marcus said. "Thank you for calling me. Thank you for being who you are," she said. She hung up. Marcus sat in the parking lot for a long time after that. He sat with the phone in his hand and the cold coming through the window he'd cracked and the noise of Colfax Avenue going about its complicated life around him. And he thought about Patricia Holloway and her daughter and the 8 months of silence that had just ended because a woman in the back of a beginner class had seen something through that glass and recognized it. He thought about the moment Derek had pointed at Lily through the window and said, "Your daughter is watching. What's she learning from you right now?" He had been furious at that. Not visibly furious. Marcus Bennett's fury was not a visible thing. Had not been a visible thing for a long time. But it had landed. The implication that Lily needed to see her father prove something. Perform something. Demonstrate his worth through dominance, rather than restraint. It had landed in a place that still felt bruised this morning. Separate from the bruise on his jaw. And now here was Patricia Holloway telling him that somewhere in Colorado Springs, A 26-year-old woman had watched 61 seconds of footage from a gym floor and called her sister. He thought about all the ways a single evening could ripple outward. He thought about the things we teach without knowing we're teaching. He started the truck. At 2:15 that afternoon, he got a call from a number. He did recognize a 703 area code. Virginia, a number that had been in his phone for 11 years under a contact name that read only Shepard. He looked at it for 3 full rings. He answered. "I was wondering when you'd call," Marcus said. "I saw the news." The voice on the other end was measured and unhurried. The voice of someone who had spent decades in rooms where unhurried voices were the most powerful thing in the space. "You look good on camera." "I'm not on camera. It's a floor recording. You can tell it's you." "I know." A pause. "Are you managing?" "I'm managing." "The media attention." "I'm managing it." Another pause. Longer. "Marcus, some people are asking questions, not reporters, other people." A careful breath. "Your file is sealed. Has been for years. But when something goes this visible this fast, people notice. And people who notice sometimes start looking." Marcus was very still in the driver's seat of his truck. "What kind of people?" he said. "The kind that knew you before," Shepard said. "The kind that have been watching the video and doing math. The math doesn't lead anywhere useful for them. No, it doesn't. But it might lead to your door. And you have a daughter at that door." A pause. "I wanted you to know. I appreciate it. Do you need anything?" Marcus looked out through the windshield at the parking lot, at the ordinary afternoon going on around him, at a city of 3 million people who had spent the last 12 hours passing around 61 seconds of footage from a gym floor, trying to figure out who he was. "No," he said. "I'm okay, Marcus." Shepard, a silence that had 20 years of context in it. "Be careful," Shepard said. "Always am," Marcus said. He ended the call. He sat in the truck. He sat with the fact that the life he had built here, the quiet one, the one with the ice cream on Colfax, and the eggs in the morning, and the drop-off circles, and the pink bag with the white stars, that life had just been touched by the other life. The sealed file. The version of himself he had walked away from and tried to leave far enough behind that it couldn't find him here. He had known, on some level, that this might happen. He had not known it would happen on a Wednesday in October because 3 men at a gym wanted to put him on the floor for the entertainment of a phone camera. He started the engine. He drove to pick up his daughter from school. She came out of the front doors at 3:25, and she walked to the car with the full-body seriousness of a person who has spent a school day thinking about something and has arrived at conclusions. She got in. She put on her seatbelt. She looked at him. "Kids at school saw the video," she said. Marcus gripped the steering wheel. "What did they say?" he asked carefully. "Some of them said you were scary." She paused. "I told them you weren't scary. I told them you were careful." He looked at her. "That's a very good word for it," he said. "I know." She settled back in her seat. "Miss Peterson said you were very skilled. She showed the class." "She showed the class?" "The part where you know. The fast part? On purpose?" "She said it was life lessons about humility." Lily considered this. "I didn't totally understand that part, but everyone thought it was cool." He pulled out of the school lot. "Dad," Lily said, "are more people going to come? Like, to our house?" The question landed with precision. "Why do you ask that?" "There was a man outside school today. I don't think he was a reporter. He didn't have a camera. He was just standing." She paused. "He was looking at me." Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. Every instinct, every calibration that had been running quietly in the background of his body for 20 years came fully online in one single second. "What did he look like?" Marcus said. His voice was very calm. Tall. Dark jacket. He had glasses. Like the ones people wear when they do sports. "Did he talk to you?" "No, he just looked. And then he left when Miss Peterson came out." Marcus breathed. He drove. "Okay. Lily, thank you for telling me. Was he bad?" "I don't know yet. But you're going to find out." It was not a question. She said it the way she said things. She was certain of, flat and clear and without drama. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm going to find out." He took a different route home than the one he usually took. He went 4 blocks out of the way and looped back from the north, which added 6 minutes to the drive and meant nothing to Lily and meant everything to him. Because the man in the dark jacket and the sport glasses had just changed the shape of this story in a way that went far beyond 3 black belts and 60 seconds on a gym mat in Denver. Someone had just sent him a message, not with words, with presence, with standing outside an elementary school and looking at a small girl with a pink bag and white stars and making sure her father found out about it. Marcus parked in front of their building. He sat for a moment. He looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, wild hair and her fox pajamas still somehow visible in his mind over the school uniform she was actually wearing, and he felt the specific kind of fear that is not fear for yourself. The kind that is so much worse. "Come on," he said. "Let's go inside." She was already unbuckling. "Can I have a snack? You can have whatever you want." She paused, looked at him with that particular clarity she had. "You're scared," she said. He looked back at her. "A little," he said. "Yeah." She nodded. "Okay," she said, and she opened the door and got out and waited on the sidewalk for him. Because she had learned, somewhere in her 8 years of paying close attention to one person, that sometimes the right thing to do when someone is scared is to simply be visible and present and not go anywhere without them. Marcus got out of the truck. He locked it. He put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. He walked her inside. Behind them, somewhere in Denver, a man in a dark jacket and sport glasses was already gone. But gone was not the same as finished. And Marcus Bennett knew, with the cold certainty of someone who had spent years learning the difference, that whatever had been set in motion the night before on the floor of a gym on Colorado Boulevard had just become something considerably larger than a video on the internet. It had become something that was moving toward them. And he had about 48 hours to figure out what it was before it arrived. He didn't sleep that night either. Not really. He lay on the couch with his eyes closed for stretches of time that weren't quite sleep and weren't quite waking. The kind of half-rest that his body knew how to use even when his mind refused to stop working. It was a skill he'd developed a long time ago in places where real slip was a luxury you planned around rather than something you simply had. And his body remembered it, the way it remembered other things quietly, completely, without being asked. At 2 a.m. he got up and checked the locks on the front door and the windows, and then stood in the hallway outside Lily's room and listened to her breathe for 30 seconds. Then he went back to the couch. At 3:15 he called Shepard back. 3 rings. Then, "I was expecting this call earlier. I needed to think first," Marcus said. "Tell me." Someone was outside Lily's school today. Tall, dark jacket, sport glasses. Watched her for a few minutes and left when a teacher came out. A silence on the other end that had texture to it. The silence of someone running calculations. "Description is generic," Shepard said. "I know." Could be Preth. Could be a concerned parent who recognized her from the video. "Could be," Marcus said. "It isn't." Another silence. "What makes you certain?" Because he left when the teacher came out, not when Lily went inside. He waited until he was sure she'd seen him, and then he left. "That's not curiosity. That's a message," Shepard breathed. "Who knows your full history? You. 3 other people. 2 of them are dead. The third hasn't spoken to me in 9 years and has no high reason to." "People develop reasons," Shepard said, "especially when something pulls an old name back into daylight." Marcus stared at the ceiling. "I need a name, or a direction, something I can move toward. Give me 24 hours. I have 48. Maybe. After that it gets harder to manage quietly." 24, Shepard said, "and Marcus, keep her close. She doesn't leave my sight," he said. He ended the call. He sat in the dark. He thought about the file Shepard had mentioned. Sealed for 11 years. The kind of sealing that required people with authority and the willingness to use it, which meant the sealing itself created a record. And records had a way of becoming interesting when the name attached to them suddenly appeared on 3 million screens simultaneously. He had built this life on the assumption that quiet was the best protection. That a man who never drew attention to himself was a man nobody came looking for. Tuesday evening had ended that assumption in 60 seconds. By 7 in the morning, Lily was eating cereal and watching him with the careful attention she'd been directing at him since the night before. Not worried exactly. More like a person who has noticed that the weather is changing and is deciding how much rain gear to put on. "Are we doing something different today?" she asked. "What do you mean? You checked the door 3 times last night. I heard you." Marcus set his coffee down. "You were awake?" "I woke up. Then I heard you checking the door. Then I went back to sleep because I figured if you were checking it, it was probably fine." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm going to take you to Aunt Denise's for a few days." Lily put her spoon down. "Why?" she said. "Not a question, a position. Because I have some things I need to take care of. And I'd feel better if—" "Lily." "No." She said it again. Cleaner, the way she said things when she had already finished the argument in her head and arrived at the conclusion and was simply reporting it. "You checked the locks 3 times. Someone was outside my school. And now you want to send me away." She looked at him. "Dad, I'm 8. Not 3. Tell me what's happening." Marcus looked at his daughter. He thought about every version of this conversation he'd rehearsed in the last 5 hours. All the ways he'd planned to be careful, to protect her from the weight of it. To carry it himself, the way he had always carried everything himself, because that was the agreement he had made with himself 11 years ago when he looked at a newborn in a hospital in Colorado Springs and understood that this was the only thing that had ever genuinely mattered. He thought about all of that. Then he told her the truth. Not everything, but enough. That before he was her dad, he had done work that was complicated and important, and that not everyone agreed with. And that he had stopped because he wanted to be her dad more than anything else. And that sometimes the past found people, even when they'd tried hard to leave it behind. And that right now he needed to make sure she was safe while he figured out what was happening. Lily listened to all of this without moving. When he finished, she said, "Are you in danger?" "I don't know yet." "Are you scared?" "A little." "Okay," she said. She picked up her spoon. I'll go to Aunt Denise's. But you have to text me every day, morning and night. And if you don't text me, I'm going to tell Aunt Denise. And she's going to call you, and you know how she calls." "I know how she calls." "Okay," she said again. And she ate her cereal with the focused calm of someone who has processed a difficult thing and has decided to be functional about it. Which was, Marcus thought, one of the most remarkable things he had ever watched a human being do. He drove her to Denise's that afternoon. The drive to Colorado Springs was an hour and 40 minutes. And they spent it the way they spent most long drives, Lily, with her window down a crack, despite the cold. Asking questions about everything they passed, Marcus answering with the kind of detail he always gave her, because he believed, fundamentally, that children deserved the real answers to their real questions. She asked about the mountains. He explained the geology. She asked why some trees were yellow and some weren't. He explained deciduous versus evergreen. She asked if he had ever been to the places he'd worked before. The complicated places. And he said yes. And she asked if they were cold. And he said some of them were. And she nodded like this was the piece of information she'd actually been looking for. At Denise's door, Lily hugged him for a long time, longer than usual, her arms around his waist, her face pressed against his chest. And she held on with the particular grip of a child who is trying to put something into physical form that she doesn't have words for yet. He held her back. "Text me," she said into his shirt. "Morning and night," he said. She let go. She picked up her bag. She walked into Denise's house without looking back. Which was always how she did it, full commitment to the next thing. And Marcus stood at the door and watched her go and felt the particular ache of love that is indistinguishable from fear of losing what you love. Denise stood in the doorway. She looked at him. Not with the energy from their phone call 2 days ago, not the excited, slightly overwhelmed energy of someone processing a surprising situation. She looked at him the way she looked at him when she was being his sister, rather than his audience. "How bad is it?" she said. "I don't know yet, but it could be bad." It could be complicated. It might be nothing. He paused. I want to say it's nothing. But you drove her here yourself. Yeah. Denise looked at him for another moment, then she stepped forward and hugged him. Brief and firm, the hug of someone who didn't waste hugs on ceremony, and meant everyone she gave. You come back, she said. Always do. He drove back to Denver. The call from Shepard came at 9:17 that night. Marcus was at his kitchen table with a legal pad in front of him and a pen he hadn't written anything with, going through what he knew and what he didn't know, and the space in between, which was large and uncomfortable. I have something, Shepard said. Tell me, the man outside the school, I think I know who sent him. There's a man named Carver, Paul Carver. He was adjacent to the program you were part of about 12 years ago. Not directly, he was a contractor on the institutional side. Money and logistics. He dropped out of contact about 8 years ago and showed up again 2 years later, running a private security consulting firm in the D.C. corridor. Marcus was very still. I know the name Carver. You should. He was in the room when you left. He didn't agree with the decision. Why would he care about me now? Because the video didn't just make you famous, Shepard said. It made you visible. And when someone who is supposed to be invisible becomes visible, it creates problems for other people who prefer to remain invisible. Carver runs operations that depend on nobody looking too closely at his past affiliations. Your video has people doing open source research on you. And open source research on you has a small chance, but real, of touching things that touch him. Marcus said. He's trying to remind me to stay quiet. That's what I think. By standing outside my daughter's school. A pause. Yes. The word landed in the kitchen like something physical. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that Shepard said, Marcus, I'm here. This can be handled without you being directly involved. There are people who can... No, Marcus said. Marcus, no outside involvement. This is mine to handle. You have a daughter who is currently in Colorado Springs waiting for your morning text, which is exactly why this is mine to handle, Marcus said. His voice was even, completely even. The kind of even that people who knew him understood was not calm but something underneath calm, the place he went when he had made a decision. And the decision was total. Give me a location for Carver. A long silence. Shepard. He's in Denver, Shepard said. Has been since Monday. He's staying at a hotel downtown. The Oxford. Thank you, Marcus. Are you going to do something I'm going to have to spend time managing? No, Marcus said. I'm going to have a conversation. That's what concerns me. It shouldn't, Marcus said. I'm very good at conversations. He ended the call. He sat at the kitchen table for a moment. Then he got up, got his jacket, got his keys, and drove downtown. The Oxford Hotel was on 17th Street. Old Denver money and dark wood, and the kind of quiet that hotels achieve when they've been expensive long enough that the guests expect it. Marcus walked in at 10:15 and went to the bar, which was the kind of bar that smelled like bourbon and leather and the particular confidence of people who had spent their lives in rooms where other people paid for things. He ordered a club soda. He sat at the bar while 12 minutes. Paul Carver came in at 10:27. Marcus knew him immediately, even though the last time he'd been in the same room as Carver was 12 years ago in a building that no longer existed under a name that no longer applied. Carver was 63 now, maybe 64, and he'd put on weight in the way of men who had been athletic and then stopped needing to be. And he wore it with the ease of someone who understood that his power was no longer physical. He had the kind of face that was difficult to remember, even while you were looking at it, which Marcus recognized as a cultivated quality rather than a natural one. He came into the bar, and his eyes found Marcus. In approximately 2 seconds, he stopped. He looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he walked over and sat on the bar stool beside him as if this were a planned meeting. You move fast, Carver said. When I need to, Marcus said. You came alone, so did you. Carver signaled the bartender, ordered a scotch, and sat with his hands on the bar in the open posture of a man who wanted to signal that he wasn't a threat and didn't mind if Marcus read whatever he wanted into that. You saw the video, Marcus said. The whole country saw the video. And you thought it was a good time to stand outside my daughter's school. Carver looked at him. I thought it was a good time to remind you that you have things worth protecting by threatening them. By indicating, Carver said, that visibility is a liability for everyone. Marcus turned on the bar stool so he was facing Carver directly. Let me tell you what I heard, he said. I heard a man who has built a business on the assumption that his past doesn't exist, discovering that the past is suddenly searchable. And I heard that man decide that the fastest way to solve his problem was to make sure I have an 8-year-old daughter who walks out of an elementary school every day at 3:25. Carver was quiet. So let me be clear, Marcus said. His voice had not changed volume or temperature. Whatever you are concerned about finding its way into daylight, it is not going to come from me. It has not come from me in 11 years. I have no interest in your business, your past, or your present. I came here to live a specific kind of life, and I have done that. He paused. But if anyone is near my daughter again, the conversation we're having right now becomes the most comfortable conversation you ever have with me. Carver looked at him. He was a man who had spent his career reading people, and he sat there and read Marcus Bennett for a long moment, the level voice, the absolute stillness, the eyes that were neither hot nor cold, but simply certain, and he arrived at a conclusion. The file stays sealed, Carver said. I know it stays sealed, and you're not going to do anything with what you know about my operations. I never was. Carver picked up his scotch, looked at it, set it down. The video is a problem, he said. And for the first time his voice had something in it that wasn't calculation. Something that was almost human concern, not just for me. The kind of attention you've drawn there are other people with less patience than me, who are going to do their own math. I know, Marcus said, and you're not worried. I didn't say that. You're here alone having a bar conversation with a man who just sent a message to your daughter. I'm here, Marcus said, because I wanted you to see my face when I told you that this ends here, and I wanted to be able to look at your face when you told me whether you understood me. A long silence. The bar moved around them. Glasses. Conversation. The ordinary sound of people having ordinary evenings. Carver said, I understand you. Good, Marcus said. He put a $10 bill on the bar for the club soda. He stood up. Bennett, Carver said. Marcus looked at him. For what it's worth, Carver said. And he paused, and something moved across his face that had lived a long way behind everything else. You made the right call. 11 years ago. Walking away. He looked at his scotch. Not everyone did. Marcus looked at him for a moment. I know, he said quietly. I knew it. Then, too, he walked out of the Oxford Hotel and into the cold Denver night. He stood on 17th Street and breathed. In. Out. The city around him was doing what cities do at 10:30 at night, moving. Living, going about the business of being alive in ways that had nothing to do with sealed files, or coded threats, or 12-year-old debts that the present had just called in unexpectedly. He texted Shepard. Handled. No further action needed. The response came back in 40 seconds. Copy. Take care of yourself. Then he texted Lily. Even though it was past her bedtime, and he'd already sent the night text. Hey. Just wanted to say good night again. Love you. He stood on the sidewalk for the 2 minutes it took for her response to come. It was a single emoji. A fox. Because of the pajamas. He smiled. He put his phone in his jacket pocket. He stood there for a moment longer, on the sidewalk, outside the Oxford Hotel. And he let himself feel the full weight of the last 72 hours, the gym, the video, the calls, Patricia Holloway, and her daughter. Shepard's warning, the man outside the school, this conversation in a bar that had just determined. He was fairly sure whether his quiet life remained quiet. He felt all of it. Then he let go the way he had learned to let things go, not by forgetting them, not by pretending they hadn't happened, but by choosing where to put his attention next. He started walking where he had parked. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Denver area code. He almost let it go to voicemail, he answered. Bennett. A voice he didn't recognize, male, young. Maybe late 20s. slightly uncertain, like someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say, and was now discovering that rehearsal and the actual moment were different things. Mr. Bennett, my name is Elliot Marsh. I'm sorry to call this late. I got your number from it, doesn't matter how I got it. I was a student at Iron Valley. Not last Tuesday, I trained there for about a year, ending about 4 months ago. A breath. I left because of the way Derek ran things. I wasn't the only one. There are 7 of us who left in the last 18 months, all for related reasons. Marcus walked slowly. What kind of reasons? Humiliation. Mostly. What you saw Tuesday night, that was the mild version. There were worse incidents. One guy, a veteran, Derek and Trevor, went after him so hard in a sparring session that he left the mat and never came back. He'd been training there for 8 months. He'd been making real progress. Elliot's voice had gotten steadier as he talked. The way voices get when the person realizes the listener is actually listening. There's more. Financial stuff. He charges students for grading tests they're never told they'll fail. He takes the money regardless. There are 3 people I know of, personally, who paid for tests, failed them, paid again, failed again, and eventually left without ever understanding why they kept failing. Marcus stopped walking. "Why are you calling me?" he said. "Because we've been trying to figure out what to do about it for 4 months. We went to the State Athletic Commission. We filed a complaint. Nothing happened. We didn't have enough. We didn't have anything that made people look." A pause. "Now people are looking. The video people are looking at Iron Valley now. And we have documentation. Tests, fees, dates, names. A written account from the veteran, which he gave us permission to use. And I've been in contact with 2 other former students who have corroborating accounts of the humiliation incidents." His voice had gone very steady now. "We need someone who people will listen to." Marcus stood on the sidewalk. He looked up. The Denver sky at night was never fully dark, too much city light. The clouds reflecting it back in a way that turned the sky amber at the edges, and he stood looking up at it for a moment, while Elliot Marsh waited on the other end of the phone. "I'm not a spokesperson," Marcus said. "I'm not asking you to be one. I'm asking if you'd be willing to look at what we have and tell us if it's enough." "Why would my opinion?" "Because 3 million people watched you walk out of that gym," Elliot said. "And the reason they kept watching, the reason it went that far, that fast, wasn't the 60 seconds on the mat. It was the moment you picked up your daughter's bag and walked out without looking back." A pause. "People aren't sharing it because you beat 3 black belts. They're sharing it because of who you were while you were doing it." Marcus was very still on the sidewalk. "Send me what you have," he said. "Email it. I'll look at it tonight." "Thank you," Elliot said. And the relief in his voice was the genuine, uncalculated kind. "Mr. Bennett, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Marcus said. "Send me the documents." He gave Elliot his email address and ended the call, and stood on the sidewalk on 17th Street in downtown Denver, with Paul Carver 40 feet behind him, in a hotel bar, and Lily asleep in Colorado Springs, and a file of documents arriving in his inbox about a gym that had been quietly breaking people for the better part of a decade. About the weight of visibility. He had spent 11 years believing that the safest version of himself was the invisible one. The man who fixed aircraft engines and picked up his daughter from school and ordered salted caramel ice cream on Colfax Avenue and didn't exist in any meaningful public sense. He had built that life deliberately, carefully. The way you build things when you understand that the building itself is the point, not the product. Not the recognition, just the act of constructing something real. And then a Tuesday evening had taken that invisible man and put him in front of 3 million people. And 3 million people, it turned out, had been waiting for something they recognized. Not a hero, not a fighter, something more specific and more difficult, a person who had the capacity for dominance and chose restraint, who had every justification for anger and chose precision instead, who walked into a room that wanted a performance and refused, comprehensively, to perform. They had recognized it because they had been looking for it. Because it was rare. He walked to his truck. He drove home. He sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop and read every document Elliot Marsh sent him. And it took 2 hours, and by the time he finished, it was past 1 in the morning, and he sat in the kitchen of his quiet apartment and felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not anger, not calculation, not the tactical assessment of a man who had spent years trained to evaluate situations and respond with minimum necessary force. Something simpler, something that felt, in the early morning quiet of the only home that had ever genuinely been his, like the recognition of a responsibility. He had wanted to be invisible. He had been made visible. And the question now, the question that had been building since 4:47 in the morning 2 days ago when he'd first picked up his phone and seen the number, was what a visible man who had spent 11 years being invisible was going to do. With that, he looked at the legal pad on the table, still blank. He picked up the pen. He started to write. Not notes about Carver. Not a risk assessment or a plan or a list of calls to make tomorrow. He wrote, because what he did when he needed to think. And thinking alone wasn't enough. He'd been doing it since before Lily was born. A private habit that nobody knew about. Pages and pages in legal pads that he replaced when they were full and kept in a box in the closet that Lily called the dad box, and was not allowed to open until she was 18. He wrote about Tuesday night, not the 60 seconds. The moment before, standing in a gym with Lily's bag over his shoulder, understanding that the door was locked and that a choice was coming, and feeling, beneath the adrenaline and beneath the calculation and beneath the practiced stillness that his body moved to, automatically, a specific and familiar grief, the grief of a man who had tried very hard not to be one thing and was about to have to be it anyway. He wrote about Lily asking if he was okay in the parking lot, about the way she had touched his jaw with 2 fingers. He wrote about Patricia Holloway's daughter calling her sister. He wrote about Elliot Marsh's voice going steady as he realized someone was listening. He wrote for an hour. When he stopped, he looked at what he had written and understood something that he hadn't understood when he sat down. He understood what the next thing was. Not because someone had told him, not because the internet had decided what his story meant. Not because Paul Carver had threatened him, or Shepard had warned him, or 3 million strangers had shared a 61-second video with their own interpretation of what it contained, but because Marcus Bennett, sitting in his kitchen at 2 in the morning, had looked at everything that had happened in 72 hours and understood the shape of it, the shape of what had been given to him without his asking, the shape of what he was now obligated, not by anyone else, not by the internet or the news or the people who called him the quiet father, obligated to himself to do with it. He looked at the blank top of the next page of the legal pad. He wrote 2 words at the top, safe path. He looked at them for a moment. Then he started to write what they meant. Outside, Denver kept moving in the way cities move at 2 in the morning steadily. Quietly, the machinery of it never fully stopping. The light from a million windows making the sky amber and close. And in a kitchen on the 3rd floor of an apartment building on a street that had nothing remarkable about it. A man who had spent 11 years being invisible was sitting at a table in the quiet after a very loud 3 days, writing the first pages of something that would take years to build and that he understood, with the particular certainty of a man who had learned to recognize important things when they arrived, was the reason those 3 days had happened. Not the video, not the 60 seconds, not even the locked door or the pink bag or the 3 black belts on a mat in Denver. The reason was 2 words on a legal pad at 2 in the morning, and the man who wrote them was already, without knowing every detail of how, beginning to figure out what came next. The 2 words stayed on the legal pad all night. Marcus didn't sleep. He didn't try to. He sat at that kitchen table and wrote until the Denver sky outside started doing the thing it did in the hour, actual dawn, not getting lighter exactly, just getting less dark. The amber of the city light, giving way to something grayer and more honest. And by the time he finally put the pen down, he had filled 11 pages of a legal pad with the kind of thinking that doesn't happen when you're trying to think, only when you stop fighting it and let it come. Safe path. What it was. What it wasn't. what it needed to something real rather than something that sounded good on paper at 2 in the morning and collapsed in daylight. He had seen enough of both kinds to know the difference. At 6:15 he texted Lily, "Morning, how'd you sleep?" The response came back in 4 minutes. She was always awake before her aunt. Always had been, and it was a string of animal emojis, followed by the word breakfast in capital letters, which he interpreted as good and hungry, which was all he needed to know. He showered. He changed. He made coffee and drank it standing at the counter rather than sitting, which was what he did when his mind was already moving faster than sitting could contain. At 7:40, he called Elliot Marsh. Elliot answered on the first ring, which meant he hadn't slept either, or had slept badly, and had his phone next to his face waiting for this. "You read everything," Elliot said. "Not a question. Every page," Marcus said. "The grading fraud documentation is solid. The written account from the veteran is exactly what an inquiry needs: specific dates, specific language, witnesses named. The financial records from the other 2 former students close the loop on the pattern." He paused. "This is enough. This has been enough for months." The problem was never the evidence. The problem was nobody was looking, Elliot said. "People are looking now," Marcus said. "I want to set up a meeting. You, me, and the others who are willing to be present. Not for press. Not for a statement. I want to sit in a room with everyone involved and understand exactly what happened and exactly what outcome you're actually trying to reach. Because there's a difference between wanting Iron Valley shut down and wanting Derek Vaughn to never be allowed to do this again. And those 2 things require different approaches." A pause on the line. "What do you think the right approach is?" "I think that depends on what I hear in the room," Marcus said. "Which is why I want the meeting first." "When?" "Tomorrow. I need today for something else." He ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then he drove to Iron Valley. He had been there twice in the last 72 hours. The first time through the front door as a student. The second time in the parking lot for a conversation that had started something he hadn't finished. This time he walked in at 8:15 in the morning when the gym was technically open but functionally quiet, one junior instructor running an early conditioning class.
Couple of serious competitors who trained before the rest of the world.
Derek was in his office. The door was open. He was sitting behind a desk covered in the specific archaeology of a man who ran a business and hated paperwork forms. Schedule sheets, equipment invoices, 2 unopened energy drinks. A mug that had been there long enough that the coffee inside it had become a philosophical question rather than a beverage. He looked up when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had been waiting, in some non-specific way, for the next thing to arrive, and had understood that the next thing was going to arrive on its own schedule. "Come in," Derek said. Marcus sat in the chair across the desk. He looked at Derek, and Derek looked at him, and for a moment neither of them said anything, which was a different kind of silence than the ones they'd shared over the last 3 days. Those had been loaded. This one was tired. 2 men who had been through something and were now on the other side of it and were trying to figure out what the other side looked like. "I've been on the phone with my lawyer," Derek said. "Okay. And with the State Athletic Commission." Someone filed a formal complaint. "Multiple complaints. Actually, the commission is opening an inquiry." He said it flatly. Without drama. "Just information. I assume you know about this." "I know about it." "Are you involved?" "I'm going to be," Marcus said. "Not to take you down. I want to be clear about that. I'm not here because I want to see this gym close. I'm here because 7 people left this place, feeling like they'd been broken rather than built. And one of them is a veteran who came here trying to rebuild something after a hard few years. And he deserves more than a formal complaint that goes nowhere." Derek was quiet. "The grading fraud," Marcus said. "Was that you? Or was that a system that got away from you?" Something moved across Derek's face. Something complicated that had several layers and wasn't going to resolve cleanly. "It started as a way to manage expectations," he said finally. "Holding people at levels longer so they'd train harder before advancing. It became," he stopped. It became something I justified in ways that I can't fully justify now. The money. The money made it easier to justify, Derek said. His voice was low. That's the honest answer. And the honest answer makes me sound like someone I didn't think I was. Marcus said. Were you the one who told Trevor to go after the veteran? In the sparring session, a long silence. No, Derek said. I didn't tell him to. I didn't stop him either. That's the same thing. I know, Derek said. I know it is. Marcus leaned forward. Here's what I need from you. Not for me. For the inquiry. A complete accounting of every grading fee collected from students who failed tests in the last 3 years. With dates and names. An acknowledgement written. Signed. Submitted to the commission that the testing process was not applied consistently or fairly. And a direct, personal apology to the veteran. Not through a lawyer. Not in a statement. You pick up the phone and you call that man, and you tell him what happened and why it was wrong. Derek looked at him. And if I do those things, I don't know what the commission decides, Marcus said. I can't control that, and I'm not trying to. But I can tell you that when I speak to anyone who asks me about this situation, and people are going to ask what I say about Derek Vaughn will be shaped by what Derek Vaughn does in the next 2 weeks. The silence that followed was the kind that meant something was actually being decided. Not performed. Not calculated. Actually settled. I'll make the call today, Derek said. Today, Marcus confirmed. The financial accounting will take a few days to. Take the time you need to do it right. Don't take longer. Derek nodded slowly. He looked at the desk, at the mug with the philosophical coffee, at the schedule sheets and the invoices and the accumulated physical evidence of a gym he had built over 16 years and had been, in some ways he was only now fully examining, failing for a significant portion of that time. I've been thinking, Derek said, about why I did what I did Tuesday night, the class. The door. He paused. The thing I can't get past is that I looked at you, and I saw something I wanted to diminish. And I didn't ask myself why I wanted to diminish it. I just moved toward it. Marcus waited. You looked like someone who didn't need to prove anything, Derek said. And I think I've spent 22 years in rooms where proving things was the whole point. And someone who didn't need to do that was... He shook his head. It felt like a challenge, even though you weren't challenging anyone, Marcus said. What does it feel like now? Derek looked at him directly for the first time in the conversation. Like I wasted a lot of years measuring the wrong things. Marcus stood up. Make the call, he said. He walked out of the office. He was in the parking lot, keys in hand, when he heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Ryan Cole standing at the gym entrance. Ryan was in regular clothes, not training gear. Just jeans and a hoodie, and he had his hands in his front pocket in the posture of someone who has been rehearsing a thing and is now uncertain whether to actually say it. Bennett, he said. Marcus stopped. Ryan came a few steps closer. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which was possibly accurate. There was still something careful in his face. The habitual awareness of a person who had spent years performing for an audience, but underneath it, cracked open by 72 hours of consequence, was something more unguarded. I uploaded the full video, Ryan said. I know. I didn't do it to help you. I want to be honest about that. I did it because I looked at it and I couldn't make it into the thing I wanted it to be. I couldn't edit it into the story I had planned. He paused. I tried. I sat with it for an hour after you left, and I kept trying to find the cut that made us look like the wronged parties. Like you'd come in and been aggressive or caught us off guard or something. But it wasn't there. The whole thing was just exactly what it was. So you posted the truth, Marcus said. By accident. Kind of, Ryan said. Yeah. Marcus looked at him. What do you want from me? Ryan shook his head. Nothing. He stopped, started again. My channel lost 40,000 followers in 2 days. Sponsors pulled out. A brand deal I'd been working on for 3 months gone. He said it without self-pity. Just reporting. I'm not saying that because I want sympathy. I'm saying it because I thought you should know what happened. And because another stop. I've been making content for 6 years. I've been in this gym for 6 years. And in 6 years, Nobody ever told me that what I was doing to new students was wrong. Including me. I never told myself. He looked at the asphalt. That's the part that's been keeping me up. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do about it? He said. Ryan looked up. I don't know yet. That's honest. It's all I've got right now, Marcus said. I'm setting up a meeting tomorrow. Former students. People who left Iron Valley because of how they were treated. I'm going to listen to what happened and figure out what needs to happen next. He paused. If you want to be in that room, not to film it, not to make content about it. Just to hear what happened when you weren't looking, the door is open. Ryan stared at him. Why would you? Because, Marcus said. The only people who are going to fix what happened inside that gym are the people connected to it. From the outside, it's just a story. From the inside, it's something that can actually change. He got in his truck. He drove. The meeting happened the next afternoon in the back room of a coffee shop on Broadway that Elliot Marsh had reserved 9 people around a table. Former Iron Valley students ranging in age from 24 to 61. Plus Marcus, plus Ryan Cole, sitting slightly apart from the group in the way of someone who understood that he was there on conditional invitation and was not taking it for granted. Marcus let them talk for the first hour. He sat and listened while 7 people described, in their own words, in their own order, what had happened to them at Iron Valley Martial Arts Center. The grading fraud 3 people, all of whom had paid multiple testing fees and received explanations that shifted each time they asked. The humiliation in class 4 people, a pattern that Marcus heard, described with the particular clarity of accounts that have never been coordinated, because coordination isn't necessary when the pattern is consistent. The veteran, whose name was James Okafor, who had driven from Colorado Springs that morning and sat at the table with his hands flat in front of him, and described, in a voice that stayed level, in the way of someone who has worked very hard to make it stay level, what had happened to him in a sparring session 14 months ago. James Okafor was 54 years old and had served 2 tours overseas and had come home with a body that carried things he didn't always have words for and had found, in martial arts, something that had started to help him carry them differently. Until the day Trevor Mills had used a sparring session to demonstrate something that had nothing to do with martial arts and everything to do with a particular kind of cruelty that is specific to people who have been given permission to exercise. Power without accountability. James described it without drama. That was the worst part. The flatness of it. The way he said it like something he had processed sufficiently to report. But that sat in the room like something that hadn't been resolved even after 14 months. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then Ryan Cole, from his chair slightly apart from the group, said, I was there that day. The room looked at him. I was in the gym, Ryan said. I saw some of it. Not all. I was on the other side of the floor, but I saw enough to know what it was. He looked at James Okafor. I didn't do anything. I went back to what I was doing. He paused. I've been trying to figure out what to call that. For the last 3 days, I've been trying to find a word for it that isn't the obvious one. James Okafor looked at him. Did you find one? No, Ryan said. A silence. Okay, James said. And the way he said it was not absolution and was not condemnation. It was something more difficult: acknowledgement. The recognition that a truth had been spoken and had landed, and that the person who had spoken it was going to have to live with it in ways that were not Ryan Cole's to control. Ryan nodded once. Slowly, Marcus spoke for the first time in an hour. The commission inquiry is open, he said. The documentation Elliot compiled is strong enough to support it. Derek Vaughn has agreed to provide a full financial accounting and a written acknowledgement to the commission. He called James this morning. James looked up. He called me, he confirmed. An hour before I drove up here. What did he say? Someone asked. James was quiet for a moment. He said what happened was wrong and that he was responsible for the environment that allowed it. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask me to do anything with it. Another pause. He just said it. The room was quiet again. Is that enough? Someone else asked. No, Marcus said. It's not enough, but it's a start. And a start that comes from the right direction is worth more than a conclusion that was forced. He looked around the table. What I want to talk about now is what comes after the inquiry, because the inquiry closes Iron Valley's chapter. What I'm thinking about is the chapter after that. He told them about Safe Path. Not in detail, the 11 pages on the legal pad were still a private thing. The blueprint in its earliest form, but the shape of it. A training center built on a different premise, where the first rule was that strength was for protection and not for dominance, and where that rule wasn't a motto on a wall, but a standard applied to every instructor. Every class, every interaction between the people who trained there and the people who taught. Place where James Okafor could walk in the door and train without being reminded that his vulnerability was someone else's opportunity. A place where Lily Bennett could learn to be stronger without learning that strength was what the loudest people in the room said it was. He talked for 20 minutes. When he finished, the room was quiet again, but differently. It was the quiet of people doing something. Elliot Marsh said, "How do you fund something like that?" Carefully,
Marcus said.
and slowly, and correctly. "I'm not moving fast on this," the video someone said. "There's a GoFundMe someone started. It's at." "I know what it's at," Marcus said. He had checked it that morning. He had looked at the number and felt the particular vertigo of a large and unexpected thing arriving in your life and needing to be handled with more care than it was offered. "I'm not taking that money without understanding exactly where it goes and how, which is why I'm not touching it yet." "That's smart," Elliot said. "It's the only way to do it," Marcus said. He drove back to his apartment that evening and called Denise. She answered before the first ring finished, which was what she did when she'd been waiting for a call and was refusing to seem like she was waiting. "How was it?" she said. "Good," Marcus said. "Hard." "Good." "James Okafor called me," Denise said. "He's a friend of a friend. You know how Colorado Springs is. He called because he wanted to tell someone who knew you that Derek Vaughn called him, and that you'd had something to do with it happening." Marcus pulled into his parking spot and sat with the engine off.
"What did he say?"
he said. Denise's voice had a different quality than it had had in any of their conversations this week. Quieter. Something in it that was more like the sister she was, before she became the sister who worried about him. He said he'd been holding something for 14 months, and that after the phone call from Derek, he felt like he could set it down. A pause. "Marcus," he cried on the phone. "A 54-year-old man who did 2 tours," he cried. Marcus put his head back against the seat. He sat with that for a moment. "When are you coming to get Lily?" Denise asked. "Tomorrow morning. I want one more night I just need one more night. She's been talking about you constantly. She told my kids that her dad is famous. But the good kind of famous, not the loud kind." Marcus smiled. "What does that mean?" "I don't know. I think she made it up. It sounded right, though." He said goodnight to his sister. He went upstairs. He sat at the kitchen table with the legal pad and read through the 11 pages he'd written in the early morning, 2 days ago. And the reading was different now than the writing had been. The writing had been a man figuring something out. The reading was a man recognizing that he had. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that resolved, when he looked at it, into Derek Vaughn's name. Derek had texted him directly for the first time. It said, "The accounting is done. 12 students. 19 test fees that weren't justified. Total collected, $4,340. I'll repay every cent personally. The written acknowledgement to the commission Friday. I wanted you to know before it happened." Marcus read it twice. He typed back, "Thank you." He set the phone down. Outside the window, Denver was doing what it did the city, moving in the particular way of a place that had been built by people who believed in something, and had kept building long after the original belief had gotten complicated, which was, Marcus had always thought, the most honest thing a city could do. He picked up the pen. He opened the legal pad to a fresh page. He wrote at the top, "What I want Lily to know." And then he wrote the thing that had been underneath all of it, underneath the gym and the video, and Carver in the hotel bar, and James Okafor's voice going level, and Ryan Coles sitting apart from a group he'd helped to wrong, underneath 11 pages of blueprints, and a meeting in a coffee shop and a call from a woman, Colorado Springs, about her calling her sister. He wrote what he had learned, the hard way and the slow way, and the only way that actually sticks, about the difference between power and strength. That power was something you took from the space around you, from the silence of people who were afraid to speak, from the deference of people who had been taught that deference was safety, from the performance of dominance in rooms where the audience didn't know they were permitted to leave. That strength was different. Strength was what remained when you had nothing to prove. When the locked door didn't change who you were. When 3 men on a mat and 4 million people watching a video and a threat delivered through the presence of men in a dark jacket outside an elementary school all failed to move you from the specific, quiet daily decision about what kind of person you were going to be. He wrote about Lily touching his jaw in the parking lot. He wrote about the fox emoji at midnight. He wrote about sitting across from an 8-year-old at a kitchen table and telling her the truth and watching her file edit in the permanent place and pick up her fork and eat her eggs. He wrote, "The bravest thing I ever did was not walk into a building where I was afraid. The bravest thing I ever did was walk out of one, carrying a pink bag, and be exactly what I had promised to be, for the person who was waiting on the other side of the glass." He set the pen down. He closed the legal pad. He went to bed. In the morning, he drove to Colorado Springs and picked up his daughter. She was on Denise's front porch when he pulled up, all ready with her bag, all ready with the stuffed elephant named Gerald under her arm, all ready in the specific posture of someone who has been ready for the last 10 minutes and is managing their impatience with dignity. She got in the truck. She put on her seatbelt. She looked at him. "You look better," she said. "I feel better." Did you fix it? He thought about James Okafor, about Elliot Marsh, about Derek Vaughn's text and Ryan Cole sitting apart from a table he'd earned his way back toward, about 2 words on a legal pad and 11 pages of what they meant and the slow, real work of building something that deserved to exist. "I started fixing it," he said. Lily considered this with the thoroughness she gave to everything that mattered. "Is that enough?" "For today," he said. "Yeah, for today it is." She looked out the window as they pulled away from Denise's street, and for a few miles she was quiet, in the way she was quiet when she was thinking, rather than when she was being polite. And Marcus drove and let her think. "Dad," she said finally, "yeah, I was thinking about what you said, about being careful instead of scary." She paused. "I think I understand it now. What do you understand?" "That careful is harder," she said. "Scary is just loud. Careful is you have to keep choosing it. Every time. Even when you don't want to." Marcus looked at the road. He felt something move through him that he didn't try to name. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly right." She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the window and the mountains and the long road home. And Marcus drove with his daughter beside him through the Colorado morning. And the city waited for them, the way cities wait for the people who belong to them, with the patient indifference of something that will be there regardless. And in the truck on the highway, the only sound was the engine and the wind, and the particular breathing of a small person who had said something true and knew it and was done needing to say more. 6 months later, Safe Path Academy opened its doors on a Tuesday morning in April. The building was small. 1 main training floor, 2 smaller rooms for children's classes, a front desk with no trophies on it because Marcus had made that decision deliberately and early. The walls had one thing on them, a single line, painted in plain black letters above the entrance to the main floor. "Strength exists to protect, not to dominate." Lily had painted the letters herself. She had taken 45 minutes to get them right. And Marcus had sat on the floor behind her and handed her the brush when she needed it, and not said a word about the time. Because some things deserve to take as long as they take. The first class had 22 students. 3 of them were former Iron Valley students, including Elliot Marsh, who had driven across town and walked in the door with the particular expression of someone arriving at a place they'd been trying to get to for a long time. James Okafor was there. He stood in the back for the first half of the class, the way Marcus had stood in the back of the Iron Valley beginner class 6 months ago, careful, watching, measuring the room against some internal standard. And then, About 20 minutes in, he stepped onto the mat. Marcus saw it happen. He didn't say anything about it, he just kept teaching. But he saw it. Ryan Cole was not in the class. He had his own rebuilding to do. And Marcus respected the particular difficulty of rebuilding something that you had helped to damage. It was a different kind of work than building from scratch. Slower and less certain, and Ryan was doing it in the way that suggested he understood it was going to take longer than he wanted. He had sent Marcus a message the week before the opening that said simply, "I'll be there when I've earned it." Marcus has read it and thought that this was the most honest thing Ryan Cole had ever said, and had responded, "The door will be open." Derek Vaughn had lost his instructor certification, pending the outcome of the commission's investigation. Iron Valley was under new management, one of the junior instructors who had been teaching the children's classes and had nothing to do with any of it. A 28-year-old woman named Carmen, who had called Marcus the week after the video went viral and said she didn't know what was going to happen to the gym, but she wanted to keep the children's program running, and could he help her think through how? He had spent 3 hours on the phone with her. He had given her every piece of advice he had. He had not asked for anything in return. On the opening morning of Safe Path, after the first class ended and the students were filing out, and Lily was helping stack the mats with the focused efficiency she brought to tasks she had decided were hers, James Okafor came and stood beside Marcus near the door. "Good class," James said. "Thank you for being in it." James was quiet for a moment. "You know what I noticed?" "What?" "You teach the same way you fight," James said. "Like you're trying to give people something rather than take something from them." He paused. "That's not as common as it should be." Marcus looked at his students through the door, through the glass, the way Lily had watched him 6 months ago on a Tuesday evening. Before any of it, he looked at 22 people of different ages and different sizes and different reasons for walking through a door on a Tuesday morning in April. And he felt the particular weight of having built something that had not existed before, and that was now imperfectly and genuinely real. "It will be," Marcus said. "If we do this right." James nodded. He picked up his bag. He walked out into the April morning. Lily appeared at Marcus's elbow, her hair in the wild configuration she got when she'd been moving fast. A foam mat tucked under each arm. "Dad," she said, "where do these go?" "Back corner. Left side." She turned and marched toward the back corner with the authority of someone who knew where things went in this building, because she had helped decide. And Marcus watched her go, with the specific, complete, unnameable feeling that had been the true center of everything for the last 8 years. He thought about a parking lot on Colfax Avenue, a chocolate milkshake, an 8-year-old asking if he was scared, and him saying every single day, and her saying, "Okay, let's go." He thought about a locked door, a pink bag, 60 seconds that had been building toward this room for 11 years. He thought about what strength actually was, not what the trophies said, not what the rankings said, not what 3 men on a mat in Denver had believed. One adequate man with worn shoes and a daughter's bag over his shoulder, and decided they already knew everything worth knowing. He thought about the long, ordinary daily work of becoming what you chose to be. And Marcus Bennett, standing in the doorway of the only gym he had ever built, in the city where his daughter lived and breathed, and painted letters on walls, and argued about milkshakes, and filed important truths in permanent places. Marcus Bennett understood, with the full weight of a life that had earned the understanding, that this was not the end of a story. It was the shape that the story had always been moving toward. And the quiet man they had mocked in that gym 6 months ago had known. Even then, even in that room, even with the door locked and 3 black belts between him and his daughter, he had known that the strongest thing in his life was not anything he had ever done on a mat. It was the small person in the back corner, stacking foam mats with both arms, who had never once doubted that he would come home.